Hello BookTube. Today is the day. Today is the grand finale of my science fiction and fantasy library tour. So today I'm going to finish off the last shelf that is fully completed and a little bit of another shelf that has only a few books on it. So let's get started. First up, we continue on with Martha Wells. This is The Element of Fire. And this is the sequel, The Death of the Necromancer. Hopefully y'all can see that. There. Next I have Ship of Smoke and Steel by Django Wexler, whose sequel should be coming out in the coming months. Sorry about that. I just had a pile of books collapse. Anyway. Which Thomas hauled yesterday on his mailbag. Thomas of SF180. And next I have some books by Dennis Wheatley. This is Uncharted Seas. Which was made into a movie called Lost Continent in the mid to late 60s by Hammer. And I also have The White Witch of the South Seas by Dennis Wheatley. And a omnibus edition of classic black magic. The books the novels in this omnibus include The Devil Rides Out, which I talked about in October, To the Devil a Daughter, and Gateway to Hell. Okay, now let's go work these out. Next we have T.H. White's The Once and Future King, and a completed edition, I think. Picked it up from the Friends of the Library book sale Nook. I think from him should come, yeah, Ted Williams' War of the Flowers, which is a standalone novel. And then I have some of the, I have the complete Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series by Ted Williams. The Dragonbone Chair, The Stone of Farewell, and To Green Angel Tower Part 1 and Part 2. All of them I picked up from Golden's Book Exchange over the past few years. And continuing with Tad Williams, I have Otherland Volume 2, The River of Blue Fire, Volume 3, Mountain of Black Glass, and the final volume, Sea of Silver Light. I picked these all up from the Friends of the Library book sale Alcove. And I don't remember if they also had the first volume there or if they didn't, and I've been meaning to pick it up since then. And I also have a Shadow March by Ted Williams, which comes from Golden's. And then we move on to Kaya Shante Wilson. This is Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps, which I talked about in my video, Has Steve Read This? Science Fiction and Fantasy Edition. I quite like the book. I really enjoyed this one. Although there were some things that I think I was a bit critical of, but I did like the Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps more than I did A Taste of Honey. But I do want to reread both novellas or short novels sometime in the near future. And I also have Evan Winter's The Rage of Dragons. Now, looking forward to reading that one in the new year. And next I have some by Gene Wolfe. The Citadel of the Autarch, Volume 4 of the Book of the New Sun. Friends of the Library Booksell Alcove, which is also where I picked up On Blue Waters, the first volume in the Book of the Short Sun, and in Green's Jungles, the second volume of the Book of the Short Sun. Both from West Waco Library and from the Waco McLennan County Public Library System. Another recent acquisition of mine is The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. And we begin to wrap this library tour up with 3 short novels by J.Y. Yang. The Black Tides of Heaven, The Red Threads of Fortune, and The Descent of Monsters, which came out last year. I read The Black Tides of Heaven and The Red Threads of Fortune when they first came out, and I liked them, but thought they were a bit... Some of the world building I thought was a bit problematic, or I had some issues with the world building, although that might also have been some of the critical response to the world building. But when I reread these, and if I get the most recent book in the series and do a big review, I might talk more about that then. I also have Lost Gods by Makayanga, which I talked about earlier this month. Really enjoyed this book. Looking forward to getting to the sequel. Next, I have Third Class Superhero by Charles Yu, which I talked about earlier in my As Steve Read It Science Fiction and Fantasy edition. Excuse me. Now we wrap this up with 3 by Roger Zelazny. This is Changeling, Lord of Light. I think Changeling came from the Friends of the Library Booksell Alcove, and Lord of Light came from Golden's in a very beat up edition. Yeah, the cover art is falling apart. And The Complete Book of Amber. This collects all of Roger Zelazny's Amber novels in one big edition. I think I picked this up from, used from Barnes & Noble. So Barnes & Noble has, in addition to their new books website where you can buy new books, they also have a used booksellers market online that you can buy used books, which is where I picked up a lot of my older used books before relatively recently, when I discovered Alibris and started using them extremely heavily. But anyway, that wraps up my science fiction and fantasy library tour. Hope you enjoyed it, and I might do another one in the coming year towards the end, after I've added to the collection and maybe rearranged it, reorganized it, and maybe even purged some books from it. So, until then, BookTube, I wish you happy holidays.